The Alpha King found his Luna unconscious holding a letter. It exposed his darkest secret. The night in Vealoria was alive with whispers. Wind hissed through the twisted spires of the castle, carrying a chill that felt almost like a warning. Lightning split the sky over the distant mountains, illuminating the kingdom's vast forests and rivers in jagged silver light. Within the heart of this ancient realm, the Alpha King, Kaelin, paced the empty corridors of his palace. The castle, though grand and majestic, seemed haunted by shadows that clung to every stone. Mind, usually sharp and unwavering, was restless. Ever since he became Alpha King, he had carried a secret that no one advisor, no guard, no family, could ever know. It was a shadow from his past, a choice made in desperation to protect the throne, yet one that had stained his soul. Most of his people saw only his strength, his emerald eyes that could command armies and hearts alike. Behind, few saw the darkness that lingered behind those eyes. On nights like this, Kaelin often wandered the gardens alone. The palace gardens were vast, filled with statues of forgotten kings and queens, fountains that shimmered under the moonlight, and flowers that bloomed in colors the mind could hardly name. Tonight, however, the gardens were different. A storm had rolled in, and the rain fell in silver threads, soaking the earth and washing the flowers with a fierce purity. As Kaelin stepped onto the wet stone path, his boots slipping slightly against the slick surface, something caught his eye. A figure collapsed near the marble fountain at the center of the garden. Even from a distance he recognized her. Leora. His Luna. She lay there, motionless, her hair spread across the stones like dark water. In her hand she clutched a piece of parchment, damp and trembling under her fingers. Kaelin's heart tightened. Something was wrong. He ran across the garden, his cloak flaring behind him like a shadow of night. Droplets of rain clung to his hair, his face tense, as he reached Leora. Gently, he knelt beside her and lifted her in his arms. Her eyes fluttered open, but only briefly, revealing a mixture of fear, confusion, and something deeper, knowledge she had not yet spoken aloud. "What happened?" Kaelin demanded, his voice low and rough, almost like a growl. Leora tried to speak, but no words came. Instead, her fingers tightened around the letter. Kaelin's hand moved to gently pry it from her grasp, but she resisted just enough to remind him she had her own will, strong and unyielding. "Luna," he whispered, his emerald gaze locking on hers. "What is it?" "What do you know?" She shook her head weakly, her lips trembling. I found something," she murmured. "I shouldn't have." Her voice broke, lost in the wind. Kaelin's chest tightened. Every instinct in him screamed to protect her, to shield her from the truths of the world, and from the truths of himself. He had hidden his past carefully, weaving lies and half-truths so the kingdom would never know the man he once was. And now it seemed, the past had reached her. The storm intensified and lightning split the sky again, illuminating the letter in her hand. Kaelin caught a glimpse of the seal, an insignia he had thought destroyed long ago, one tied to the choice that had marked him. His heart stopped. "Leora," he said softly, almost a prayer. "Don't read it. Please." Her eyes, already wide with realization, showed that the secret had found its way into her mind. Kaelin could see it in her expression, the moment she understood the depth of what he had done, what he had hidden. The garden, soaked with rain and moonlight, felt like a stage where fate had drawn them both. "Kaelin," carried her into the castle, every step heavy with dread and longing. The hallways were silent, except for the echo of his boots and the faint, steady drip of water from the storm outside. He placed her gently on a chaise near the hearth. She shivered, but not from cold. The revelation in her mind had shaken her to her core. Kaelin knelt before her, taking her hands in his. They were small, delicate, yet filled with a determination that surprised him. How could someone so gentle hold such power to confront a king?
You must rest, Kaelin said. Forget the letter for now.
Your mind cannot bear this weight yet. Leora's gaze held his, searching, questioning, but also a little accusing.
There was a quiet fire in her eyes, a warning he could not ignore. She spoke softly, her voice trembling, yet firm. I cannot forget what I know, Kaelin.
The truth. It changes everything.
Kaelin closed his eyes, his chest aching.
The truth was dangerous. It could unravel the kingdom, ruin the people he had sworn to protect, and destroy the fragile bond between him and Leora. And yet, he could not bring himself to lie to her. Not anymore. The castle itself seemed to respond to the storm, walls groaning as if echoing his inner turmoil. Shadows stretched across the floor like dark fingers creeping closer, whispering of betrayal, secrets, and consequences. Kaelin felt the weight of centuries of kings before him pressing down, their mistakes haunting him like ghosts. He had inherited more than a throne. He had inherited a destiny, one that was now intertwined with Leora's fate. Hours passed. Leora remained near the fire, silent, her thoughts a mystery even to Kaelin. He watched her, torn between his desire to comfort her and his fear that any word might push her away. He remembered the first time he had seen her, bright and unafraid, walking among the people of Valoria with a smile that seemed to hold the sun itself. Death, that Leora felt distant now, almost unreachable, made the ache in his chest sharper. Finally, she spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. Kaelin, why did you hide it?
Why did you let this darkness exist? Kaelin looked away, unable to meet her gaze.
The letter's secret was not just a personal sin. It was a wound in the kingdom itself.
I thought I was protecting everyone, he admitted.
Desk, including you. Leora's hand lifted to touch his face, but she hesitated, unsure. But the truth, it cannot be buried forever. It will find its way, even through silence and shadows. He glances around in potion. Her words struck him like a blade. She was right. No matter how carefully he had constructed walls around the past, it had come back to him. Through her, through this letter, through fate itself. And now, for the first time in his life, he felt powerless. The storm outside began to calm, but inside Kaelin a new storm was rising. Fear, longing, guilt, and love collided in a tangle of emotion he could not unravel. Leora's presence was a beacon, a reminder that even in darkness there was hope. But only if he dared to face the consequences of his choices. He reached out to her again, slowly this time, letting her take his hand if she wished. Desk. She did, her grip firm despite her own fear. In that simple touch he felt the pull of destiny, of something larger than both of them. Bo. She was not just a witness to a secret. She was a force that could either break him or save him. Kaelin, she said quietly, I need to understand. I cannot stay in the dark. The words he had feared, the confession he had avoided, were now inevitable. God! And yet, something in the way she looked at him, her trust, her courage, her unwillingness to turn away, made him believe that perhaps redemption was possible, even for a king whose hands were stained with past choices. A sudden knock at the door startled them both. The hall outside was empty, the guard nowhere to be seen. Only the echo of footsteps, long and deliberate, resonated through the castle. Kaelin's hand instinctively moved to the hilt of his sword, but the feeling was not danger from the world. It was danger from fate itself. Someone knew, or perhaps would soon know, of the secret that now bound him and Leora together. Leora looked at the door, then back at him. Patient. "They will come for the truth," she said, her voice calm but certain. "And when they do, what will you do?" Kaelin could not answer. He only knew that he could not hide, could not run, and could not let her face it alone. Bond, between them, forged by prophecy and fate, had just begun to show its true weight. The storm outside had passed, leaving the world soaked and glistening under the pale light of the moon. But inside, Kaelin's heart felt as though it were still caught in the tempest. He held Leora close, the letter pressed between them like a silent threat, and for the first time he wondered if love, fragile, uncertain, and dangerous, could truly survive the shadows of the past. And then she whispered, barely audible over the crackling of the dying fire.
I know what you did. Kaelin's breath caught. His secret was no longer his alone.
The walls he had built around himself and his heart trembled. For the first time he faced the terrifying possibility that the darkness he had carried for so long might now reach the one person he could not bear to lose. The night seemed to hold its breath. Somewhere in the distant forests a wolf howled, a single, mournful cry that echoed through the kingdom. Kaelin's grip on Leora tightened, his emerald eyes blazing with equal parts fear and determination. The journey had begun, and nothing, neither crown, nor curse, nor the shadows of his past, would ever allow them to turn back. The morning after the storm, the palace of Valoria was quiet but tense. Sunlight tried to pierce the high windows, scattering silver rays across the marble floors, yet even the light felt muted, as if the castle itself sensed the unease that lingered in its halls. Kaelin, the Alpha King, moved like a shadow through the corridors, his mind restless. Every step brought him closer to the inevitable. The truth in Leora's eyes could no longer be ignored, and his secret, once safely hidden, now hovered between them like a blade. Leora had awakened at dawn. Her hair, still damp from the storm, fell across her shoulders in dark waves, framing a face marked by unease and determination. She had spent hours staring at the letter, reading its words over and over in silence. Her mind was a storm of questions, doubt, and a strange curiosity about the man she had always seen as both powerful and untouchable. Colin found her seated near the eastern balcony, the morning breeze brushing against her skin. She was looking out toward the forest, the trees still wet with rain. Kaelin's chest tightened at the sight. She seemed fragile and yet impossibly strong at the same time. "Luna," he said quietly, stepping closer. "You shouldn't dwell on the letter. It will poison your mind before it teaches you anything." Leora turned to face him, emerald eyes sharp, a mirror of his own.
I cannot ignore it, Kaelin. The truth.
It is already part of me, and I need to understand it.
I need to understand you.
Kaelin's throat tightened. He had ruled his kingdom with power, strategy, and control. Yet here was Leora, challenging him not with force, but with trust and bravery, the kind that could pierce even the strongest walls. He knelt before her, taking her hands gently, careful not to frighten her further. "You must know," he said, his voice low, "that the path I took, it was never meant to hurt you or anyone else. I did what I believed necessary to protect Valoria, but some choices leave marks that never fade." Leora's gaze softened, though a shadow of doubt lingered. I see that now, Kaelin. And yet, seeing it does not make it easier. I feel the weight of it, even if I was not there when it happened. A silence fell between them, deep and tense, broken only by the soft rustle of leaves outside.
In that quiet, the bond between Alpha and Luna strengthened in an unusual way, not through comfort, but through shared vulnerability.
Palin realized that for the first time, he could not protect her from everything. The future was uncertain, and trust would have to be earned, moment by moment, word by word. But the world outside the palace was restless. Whispers of rebellion stirred among the people, amplified by the shadows that moved with unnatural life across Vealoria. Rumors of Kaelin's past misdeeds had begun to spread, and the enemies of the crown were poised to take advantage of any weakness.
Kaelin, Leora said suddenly, her voice steady despite the storm of thoughts in her mind. The people, the shadows.
Bet they feel the unrest.
You must act.
You cannot stay hidden while darkness grows. He met her gaze, surprised by the resolve she displayed. Usually he was the one who dictated action, who led the kingdom through fire and blood. Yet here was Leora, offering guidance, warning, and strength. The realization struck him with both awe and unease. She was no ordinary Luna. She was a force unto herself, and he had underestimated the depth of her courage. Before he could answer, a messenger arrived, breathless and soaked from the lingering rain. In his hand was a scroll sealed with wax bearing the insignia of the Council of Shadows, a secretive group that influenced the kingdom's fate. Kaelin took the scroll, breaking the seal, and read its contents with a furrowed brow. The council demands your presence, he said, his voice tight. Distress. They know of the letter. Fear and concern mingling in their depths.
They know?
Destry.
How? Who could have? Kaelin pressed a hand to her shoulder, steadying her.
It doesn't matter. What matters now is what we do.
We cannot hide. We must face them together, or risk everything.
The palace prepared for the council's arrival. Guards moved silently through the halls, shadows of authority brushing against walls lined with centuries of history. Kaelin and Leora stood side by side, the tension between them unspoken yet palpable. It was more than a bond of prophecy now. It was survival, trust, and the fragile beginnings of something deeper. That evening, under a sky lit by the crescent moon, they entered the council chamber. The room was cold, the stone walls echoing every step, and the air thick with expectation. The council members, cloaked in black robes, their faces hidden, sat in a semicircle, their presence both intimidating and otherworldly.
Alpha King Kaelin, the eldest member spoke, voice smooth but filled with quiet menace. The secrets of your past have reached us.
And now they threaten the balance of Vealoria. You must answer, and you must act. Kaelin met the council's gaze with the calm of a king, though his heart raced. Leora stood beside him, silent but unwavering. Together they were a symbol of defiance and unity against the weight of judgment. I will not deny the choices I made, Kaelin said, voice steady but low, nor will I hide from the consequences. I acted to protect my kingdom, my people, and yes, even my Luna. But some truths, once buried, demand to be faced. A ripple of murmurs passed through the council, and Kaelin felt a strange mixture of dread and relief. The truth was out, but it had been delivered on his terms. For the first time, he could no longer hide behind fear and secrecy. Leora stepped forward, her presence commanding yet gentle. The truth can break a kingdom, or it can make it stronger, she said, her voice carrying across the cold chamber. Kaelin has chosen to face it.
And I stand with him, as his Luna, as his equal.
The council fell silent, the weight of her words lingering.
Kaelin's chest swelled with both pride and awe.
He had never expected such courage from someone so young, so tender, and yet so unyielding. But the council was not easily swayed. A younger member, sharp-eyed and calculating, leaned forward. "The darkness that surrounds your past choices cannot be undone by words alone," he said.
"The shadows of Valoria stir. There are forces at work you cannot yet see.
"You must prepare, Alpha King, for what comes next." Kaelin's jaw tightened. He had sensed the unrest, the unnatural movements of the shadows, but he had hoped to face them alone. Now, with Leora by his side, he realized he would need her wisdom, courage, and heart more than ever. After the council dismissed them, Kaelin and Leora returned to the palace gardens. The moon had climbed higher, casting silver light over wet stones and glistening fountains. The air was thick with expectation and tension, the kind that promised both danger and change. Leora sat on the edge of the fountain, her reflection rippling in the water. Kaelin knelt beside her, hands brushing against hers. "The council is right," he said softly.
The shadows will not wait, and soon the entire kingdom may be threatened by forces beyond our control."
Leora's gaze met his, unwavering. "Then we will face them together," she said. "I do not fear the shadows when I am with you, but you must promise me something, Kaelin. No more secrets between us."
If we are to survive, we must be honest, fully, and without reservation.
Kaelin's chest tightened. The request was simple, yet monumental.
Trust had always been difficult for him. Secrecy had been his armor, breaths. Yet looking into Leora's eyes, he saw not just concern, but strength, understanding, and a light he had long forgotten existed. "I promise," he said, his voice steady, though his heart trembled. "No more secrets. From this moment, we face everything together."
The night air was still, almost reverent, as if the world itself acknowledged the weight of their vow.
Somewhere in the distance a wolf howled, a single mournful note that carried through the forests and hills a reminder that Veoloria's dangers were far from over. As they sat together, Kaelin noticed movement at the edge of the garden. Shadows darker than night itself flickered and twisted unnaturally among the trees. They were not the harmless shadows of moonlight. They moved with intent, awareness, and hunger. "Palin," Leora's voice broke through his thoughts, calm yet alert. "Do you see them?" He nodded, standing and drawing a blade forged with both steel and ancient magic. The shadows seemed to recoil at its presence, but only slightly. Kaelin realized that whatever was coming could not be fought with skill alone. It would require unity, trust, and perhaps the bond between Alpha and Luna that had only just begun to take form. The night deepened, and the shadows pressed closer. Kaelin stood tall, Leora at his side, both of them ready yet uncertain. The storm of destiny, prophecy, and rebellion was gathering, and neither of them could predict what it would bring. And then, from the darkness beyond the trees, a voice whispered, low, chilling, and impossibly close. "The king's secret has been seen, and now the reckoning begins," tightened around the hilt of his sword. Leora stepped closer, her presence a steady flame against the cold fear. Bond between them, fragile yet unbreakable. was about to be tested like never before. The shadows moved. The night waited. And Veiloria's fate hung on the edge of a blade. A secret, and the strength of two hearts bound by destiny. The night that followed the council's warning was heavy and silent. Veoloria seemed to hold its breath. Storm clouds lingered over the mountains, and the forests whispered with secrets too old to name. Kaelin, the Alpha King, could feel the weight of his choices pressing on him like a living thing. Every shadow seemed to twist and stir, carrying the thread of truth, betrayal, and vengeance.
Leora stayed close, her presence a quiet flame in the darkness. She no longer needed words to show her resolve. It shone in her gaze, steady and unwavering.
She had spent the hours after the council reading, listening, and thinking. The letter's revelation about Kaelin's past, a choice that had saved the kingdom at the cost of an innocent life, haunted her. Yet she did not judge him outright. Instead, she sought to understand, to measure the man behind the throne. The castle corridors felt colder now, almost unnatural. The servants whispered among themselves, careful not to speak aloud of the shadows that had begun to creep into Veoloria.
Kaelin moved through the halls with the grace of a predator, every sense alert, yet his mind was distracted by Leora's presence, by the truth she now held, and by the forces gathering outside the castle walls. A sudden knock at the chamber door startled them.
Kaelin's hand went instinctively to the hilt of his sword. "Who is it?" he called, his voice low but commanding.
A young messenger stepped inside, eyes wide and fearful. "My king, the Northern Watch reports something in the forest."
Shadows, moving like they have life of their own. Villagers are disappearing, and there are whispers of an unnatural force. Please, you must act.
Kaelin's jaw tightened. This was no ordinary rebellion or trick of fear.
The shadows were alive in a way that defied logic, a darkness that answered not to the light of the moon, but to malice itself. He turned to Leora, who met his gaze without hesitation. "We must go," he said. "Now." Outside, the forest was alive with movement. Dark shapes twisted between the trees, and the wind carried voices that seemed to speak directly into their minds. Kaelin's senses were heightened. Every muscle coiled, every thought alert. Leora stayed close, her hand brushing against his, a silent promise that they would face whatever came together. The deeper they went, the more the shadows multiplied. Trees seemed to lean toward them, roots twisting like serpents, and the fog rose from the ground in thick, choking waves. Kaelin could feel the curse, the remnants of his past choices, reacting to the darkness as if the forest itself remembered his sins. Then, a figure emerged from the shadows, cloaked and hooded. It stepped onto the path before them, and the air seemed to freeze. The figure's voice, smooth and chilling, echoed through the trees. "Kaelin, Alpha King. You cannot hide from what you have done." Kaelin's hand went to his sword, but Leora stepped forward, her eyes blazing with courage. "Who are you?" she demanded. The figure laughed softly, a sound that carried both mockery and threat. "I am the reckoning," it said. "The truth you try to bury will rise, and all who follow you will fall if you cannot face it." Before Kaelin could respond, the figure vanished into the shadows, leaving behind a trail of cold, unnatural wind. The forest seemed to shiver, as if alive, and the shadows pressed closer, circling them, testing their strength, their bond, their resolve. Leora's grip tightened on Kaelin's arm. "They are testing us," she said, her voice steady. "Whatever this is, it wants to see how strong we are together." Kalen nodded, determination hardening in his chest. Then we will not fail. Not now, not ever.
They pressed on, moving deeper into the forest where the shadows were thickest. The further they went, the more the whispers grew.
They spoke of betrayal, of secrets, of past sins that had been forgotten, or so Kalen had hoped. One whisper made his blood run cold. The king's Luna knows, and she may turn against him. She had not faltered, but the thought of doubt entering her mind struck him with a pang of fear he could not shake. Trust, fragile as it was, hung by a thread between them. If it broke, the kingdom and their bond could fall together. Suddenly a flash of movement in the fog caught Kalen's attention. Bad. Figures emerged, not human, not fully shadows either. Creatures twisted by the dark magic of Vealoria, sent by forces unseen. They were fast, silent, and deadly, surrounding them like wolves circling prey. Kalen drew his sword, the steel glowing faintly with ancient runes that held protective magic. Leora's hand found the hilt of a smaller blade at her side, her stance poised and ready. Together they fought. Kalen's strength and skill paired with Leora's insight and courage created a synergy neither had expected. Every strike, every movement spoke of trust, of unity, of an unspoken bond forged in shared danger. Yet even as they fought, Kalen felt the pull of the shadows at his mind. The curse tied to his past misdeeds stirred within him, whispering doubt and fear. What if she turns against him? What if all this ends in betrayal? He shook the thoughts away, focusing instead on Leora's presence beside him. Her bravery, her heart, her unwavering trust became his anchor. And for a moment, amidst the chaos and shadows, he felt something he had long believed lost. Hope. But hope is fragile, especially in a world built on secrets and lies. As they reached the heart of the forest, the shadows parted to reveal a clearing. At its center stood a figure Kalen had thought long dead, his brother, Valor, who had vanished years ago under mysterious circumstances.
Valor's eyes gleamed with a strange light, half anger, half sorrow, and his voice was sharp as a blade.
Kalen, he said, you have ruled while hiding the truth. You have bound yourself to darkness, and now it consumes you. Eowyn froze, disbelief and shock crashing over him. Valor had been lost to the kingdom, presumed dead, yet here he stood, transformed by whatever forces the forest had granted him. Leora's hand found Kalen's, her grip firm, grounding him in reality.
Brother, Kalen said cautiously, if you have returned, it is not as an enemy.
Speak your purpose. Valor laughed, a sound that carried both cruelty and sorrow. Purpose?
I am the reckoning. I am the darkness that you tried to hide from, and I will show the kingdom the truth of the Alpha King. Your Luna knows! And now, all will see. Pounded. This was more than a test! This was the fracture of the throne itself, the emergence of old sins, old wounds, and forces that could topple the kingdom. Leora stepped forward, her voice calm but resolute.
Kalen, we face this together, she said. You are not alone.
Whatever comes, I will stand by your side. Valor's eyes flicked to her, and for a moment he seemed surprised. Bess. Then, with a flick of his hand, shadows erupted from the ground, swirling like a storm. The creatures they had fought before now multiplied, their forms larger, more twisted, more terrifying. Kalen and Leora braced themselves. The air was thick with magic, with curses, with the weight of the past finally reaching into the present. The battle began. Steel clashed with shadow, magic met ancient curses, and the forest became a theater of war and destiny. Kalen fought with every ounce of strength, every skill he had honed as Alpha King, yet even he knew that brute force alone would not win this fight. Leora's insight, her courage, and her bond with him were equally vital. Every strike they made together was a dance, a rhythm that spoke of unity, love, and the need to survive against impossible odds. Hours passed. Fatigue set in. The shadows pressed closer, and the forest seemed endless. Kalen began to feel the pull of the curse, the weight of his past misdeeds tugging at his soul. It whispered doubt, anger, and fear. She knows your secret. She will turn. She cannot forgive. And then the worst fear came true. A shadow struck from behind, and Leora was thrown to the ground. Kalen's heart leapt into his throat as he raced to her side. She was not unconscious, but her blade had been knocked away, and she was pinned by a creature of pure darkness. Pass. Leora! Kalen roared, striking the shadow with all his might. His sword glowed brighter, cutting through the black tendrils, but the force of the attack sent him staggering back. Leora struggled to rise, her eyes meeting Kalen's. But you must face him, she said through gritted teeth, pointing toward Valor. Kalen's chest ached. The bond between them was tested as never before. He had sworn to protect her, yet she now pushed him forward, urging him to confront the darkness that threatened not only Valoria, but their bond, their destiny, and their hearts. Valor stood in the center of the clearing, his eyes gleaming like twin storms. Kalen, he said, voice echoing through the trees. This is the end of the Alpha King as you know him. Your Luna may be brave, but bravery cannot save you from the consequences of your past. Kalen gritted his teeth, raising his sword. A storm of shadows swirled around him, around Leora, around everything he had fought to protect. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the kingdom, the bond with Leora, and the truth of his past converging into one moment. This ends now, he said, voice steady, emerald eyes blazing. I face my past. I face the darkness. And I face it with my Luna by my side. The shadows roared in answer, the forest shivering with tension, and Valor moved, his presence radiating power and anger. Kalen and Leora stood together, ready for the fight that would decide the fate of Valoria, the survival of their bond, and the redemption of a king. The forest was silent after the storm of shadows. Moonlight fell across twisted roots and shattered leaves, illuminating the clearing where Kalen and Leora faced Valor and the darkness that had been unleashed. The air was thick with magic and fear, and even the ancient trees seemed to bend toward the clearing, as if eager witnesses to the final reckoning. Kalen's chest heaved as he stood beside Leora. His sword, still glowing faintly with protective runes, felt heavier than ever. The weight of the past pressed down on him, the secrets, the mistakes, the sins he had hoped to bury. Yet here he was, exposed, vulnerable, and yet determined to protect his kingdom. And the Luna who had chosen to stand with him. Leora's hand found his, and he felt a spark of calm in the chaos. She did not speak, but her presence was a reminder that he was not alone. Their bond, forged through prophecy and tested through shadows and betrayal, had become their greatest weapon. Kalen realized that redemption was not a solitary path. It was shared, built in trust and courage. Valor's eyes blazed with anger and sorrow, his voice echoing through the clearing. Kalen, you have ruled with lies, with half-truths, and yet you pretend to be worthy of the crown. The people deserve the truth. The kingdom deserves the reckoning. Kalen raised his chin, meeting his brother's gaze. I face my past, my choices, and their consequences, but I will not let darkness rule this kingdom. Not while I breathe. Not while my Luna stands beside me. Valor's laugh was cold, filled with the bitterness of years lost. Your Luna? She knows your secret. Perhaps she will see your truth for what it is, and turn from you. Kalen felt a pang of fear, but he pushed it aside. He could not let doubt weaken him. Not now. Leora's eyes met his, unwavering and full of trust. That trust was a light in the darkness, a flame he could not extinguish, even in the shadow of his brother's wrath.
You will see, Valor, Kalen said firmly. The bond between Alpha and Luna is stronger than your shadows.
It is stronger than your vengeance. It is stronger than the past you cling to. Please. Valor sneered and raised his hand. Shadows erupted from the ground, forming tendrils that twisted and writhed like serpents. Despis. They surged toward Kalen and Leora, hungry for fear and weakness.
Kalen and Leora moved as one.
He swung his sword with precision, cutting through the dark tendrils while Leora struck with quick, decisive movements that showed her growing mastery of her own strength and intuition. Together they were unstoppable, a harmony of light and shadow, trust and courage. But the darkness was relentless. It pulsed with anger fed by Valor's bitterness and the echoes of Kalen's past sins. Tendrils lashed at them from every direction, the forest itself seeming to conspire against them. Kalen could feel the curse stirring, whispering doubt, whispering fear, whispering that even love could not save him. He shook his head, refusing to listen. Leora's grip tightened on his arm, a steadying force. She did not fear the shadows because she believed in him and in their bond. Kalen realized then that redemption was not about erasing the past. It was about facing it, owning it, and using it to protect those he loved. Kalen pressed forward, cutting through the darkness, and Leora followed, her blade a streak of silver in the moonlight. Each strike, each movement, was more than survival. It was a declaration. They would not yield. They would not fall. Valor watched, fury and despair warring in his eyes. You will never win! The past cannot be undone. Kalen slowed, lowering his sword slightly. You are right, he said, voice calm and clear. The past cannot be undone. But the present can be changed. And the future can be redeemed.
At that moment, the shadows faltered.
Kalen's words, filled with conviction and love, seemed to resonate through the forest. Leora stepped forward, her voice strong and clear. Valor, it is not too late. The darkness does not have to control you. We can end this together, without destroying what remains of our family and our kingdom. Valor hesitated. For the first time, the anger and bitterness in his eyes flickered. He had believed that revenge was the only path, that the past would define him forever. Yet the courage of Kalen and Leora, their unwavering trust and unity, shone like sunlight through the darkness, offering a glimpse of another way. The shadows recoiled, uncertain, as if sensing the shift. Kalen's sword glowed brighter, the runes etched along its blade pulsing with ancient magic tied not to violence, but to truth and protection. Leora's movements became more confident, more precise, each strike purifying the darkness rather than destroying it. Kalen took a step toward his brother, keeping his sword steady but lowering it slightly in a gesture of peace. Valor, he said, voice carrying the weight of sincerity. I was wrong. I have made choices that hurt, choices that left scars. But I am not your enemy. I am your brother. Dead, let us end this together. Valar's hands trembled, and the shadows around him wavered. For a moment it seemed as if the darkness itself was uncertain, caught between anger and hope. He looked at Leora, standing beside Kalen, her expression calm yet unyielding. And in that moment, something within him shifted. The shadows began to dissolve, melting into the earth like mist under the morning sun. Valor fell to his knees, exhaustion and relief washing over him. I do not know if I can forgive. But perhaps there is still a way forward. Palin lowered his sword completely and extended a hand. We can face the consequences together, he said. We can heal if we choose to. Leora stepped closer, placing a hand on Valor's shoulder. Strength comes from more than power or revenge, she said softly. It comes from love, from courage, and from the choice to do what is right, even when it is hard. For the first time in years, the clearing was silent. Not tense, not filled with shadows, but still and calm, as if the forest itself had taken a breath. Kaelin looked at Leora and she smiled. A small, quiet smile that carried hope, trust, and the promise of a new beginning. They returned to the palace slowly, the forest behind them healing in the quiet aftermath of the battle. The kingdom had been tested, the throne had trembled, and the shadows had shown their teeth. But the Alpha King and his Luna had faced the darkness together and emerged not only unbroken, but stronger. In the days that followed, Kaelin addressed the council and the people of Valoria. He spoke openly of his past choices, of the mistakes that had haunted him, and of the lessons learned from facing the darkness. The kingdom, though wary at first, listened. They saw a king who was strong yet humble, powerful yet accountable, a ruler who could be both feared and loved. Leora remained by his side, her presence a reminder that even kings need guidance, that even alpha strength finds balance in love and trust. Together they redefined the bond of Alpha and Luna, not as a prophecy alone, but as a partnership built on courage, honesty, and unwavering support. Valor, too, began a slow journey of redemption, guided by the example of his brother and Leora. The curse that had lingered over the forest and the kingdom began to fade, replaced by hope and renewal. The shadows no longer moved with malice. They were reminders of the past, lessons etched into the land, but no longer threats. On a quiet night, Kaelin and Leora stood together atop the palace balcony, looking out over the kingdom. The moon shone bright, casting silver light over rivers, forests, and mountains. The world was not perfect. The past could not be erased, but the future stretched before them, filled with possibility. Kaelin took Leora's hand, feeling the warmth and certainty of her touch. We face the darkness, he said, voice soft. And yet, it feels like the real journey is just beginning. Leora smiled, leaning close. The journey will always be ours, she said. Together no shadows can break what we have built. In the silence, listening to the distant rustle of trees, the whisper of wind, and the faint echo of wolves howling across the kingdom. The night was calm, but alive, carrying the memory of battles fought and the promise of battles yet to come. Kaelin breathed deeply, feeling the weight of the crown not as a burden, but as a responsibility he could face with honesty, courage, and love. Leora squeezed his hand, and he knew that no matter what trials awaited, they would face them together. Alpha and Luna, bound not just by prophecy, but by choice and heart. Somewhere in the distant mountains, a shadow lingered, faint but watchful. The world had been changed, and Valoria had survived. But destiny was never finished. Kaelin and Leora knew this, yet they did not fear it. Before they had faced the darkness, embraced the truth, and emerged stronger than before. The Alpha King and his Luna looked at each other, smiles quiet but full of promise. The night was theirs, the kingdom theirs, and the bond they shared. A bond forged in trials, shadow, and truth was eternal. And as the first light of dawn touched the kingdom, Kaelin whispered, almost to himself, "The world may remember our sins, but it will also remember how we rose." Leora leaned close, her voice soft. "And we will rise together, always." The kingdom of Valoria breathed with life once more. The shadows faded, the curse broken, and two hearts, Alpha and Luna, ready to face whatever the future might bring.